Hello, everyone. I'm Librarian Shamika. Welcome to a new episode of Career Conversations. This new video features a pre recorded interview with librarian Jensen Ortiz. Jensen works at the City College of New York Dominican Studies Institute Library as a librarian. The Dominican Studies Institute Library is the only library in the United States dedicated to acquiring, organizing, preserving, and providing access to primary and secondary sources of information and historical research related to Dominican studies. It was an absolute pleasure interviewing Jensen. Jensen is passionate about his work, and after speaking with him, he is also very modest and humble, especially about being an integral part of preserving Dominican culture. I hope you enjoy our interview. Cultural centers and archives are important, especially to those in traditionally marginalized groups. These centers bring history, heritage, context, and voice to people of marginalized groups who are often left out of or misrepresented in history books. Tell us about your experience working as a researcher, and do you apply any of your library and archive skills to your research?
Well, my experience as a researcher has been rewarding. I struggled early on with evaluating and deciphering sources that I encountered because I did not have the interpretive or critical skills to understand the biases or perspectives that I was reading. Once I went to graduate school, I did acquire the skills to locate and evaluate and utilize a wide variety of sources as a librarian. Putting those skills into practice with helping others find information, I think, made me a better researcher. Um, and then navigating electronic sources to find books, journals, and magazines, encyclopedia references on any given topic that I was researching. That was an important part in the process to becoming a researcher and a good one at that, because I think oftentimes I would go unprepared to the archives. I would not have sort of the background knowledge on a given topic, or not enough, because I would spend a lot of time looking through archival collections. And I think once I was better prepared through reading the secondary sources, I think I was able to find what I was looking for in archival collections, and sort of bridge the gap that way and become a better researcher. Also in graduate school, I learned a lot about archival theory, and I got to put that into practice through processing and appraising and cataloging collections, and working on finding aids. I think gave me sort of an insight into how collections are organized and the structure behind it. And sometimes I could find omissions and gaps in archival collections that now offer me an opportunity to sort of expand my skill set by looking for other means to find the same information. Oftentimes, I would go and contact individuals or families with their own personal collections, and acquire those archival materials for the research that I was doing. Another tactic that I used was going on eBay to find memorabilia and other ephemera that had not made their way to archival collections per se, but these were sort of informal ways of me finding what I was looking for. And that also made me a better researcher, and it was a talent that I developed, and I had a passion for it, and I still do. Because I think oftentimes once you find omissions in the secondary sources, and particularly in scholarship, you need to go to the archival collections to see if you can fill those gaps. And they're not always in the archives, and that was frustrating for me not to find that information or archival source there. I would like to add that one of the habits that I continue as a researcher is really checking out books and journals and magazines and newspapers to find further information that I could sort of get my hands on before I pursue any primary sources. Um, because oftentimes I like to look at how things are written about first and how perspectives have changed over time. And that sort of prepares me to find any sort of perspectives or information about the author or who produced this particular archival source if I do encounter that, and make better assumptions and interpretive sort of inquiries into any particular source. And you have to develop these skills over time. And I think for me, it's been a process of trial and error. Sometimes I don't have the answer right away when it comes to interpreting a particular archival source, but I do try to do enough research through secondary sources to better understand who this individual was and why he produced this particular record and for who it was intended. Um, and that ultimately has all contributed to me becoming a better researcher.
What is the importance of community archives? Does your library and archive function as one?
Community archives are important because they recognize the untold stories and interpretations of people who come from marginalized and underrepresented communities. They also provide a platform for people to ask questions and have a dialogue concerning their people and their historical experiences. Um, it's important to mention that not too long ago you had people who uh, encountered archives where they didn't see themselves represented in their collections. You did not have records produced by the community for the community represented either. So activists and educators and people in the field started noticing, and the creation and eventual development of community archives throughout the years have really changed sort of the narrative about our experiences and contributions to life in the United States. When it comes to the CUNY Dominican Studies Institute archives, I think it's done an amazing job in preserving the legacy and the contributions of Dominicans in New York City. The CUNY DSR archives also functions as a community archive, even though we're located at the City College of New York. If the person is interested in looking at the collection, all they need to do is show an ID. We also encourage folks to talk about the archives. We do our part in outreach by inviting teachers to come with their classes or interact with some of the collections. It's our way of showcasing to them the importance of preserving their own personal archives and the records of their families, because ultimately that's what's also going to contribute to our own archives eventually in establishing sort of a collective identity for Dominicans in the United States. The archives has also made an impact socially in the community. I think we have uh, made some inroads in terms of by broadening the understanding of Dominicans and their contributions to the city. We have collections like the Normandia Maldonado collection that spans about 4 decades, from the 1960s to the 1990s, that show you how culturally Dominicans have sort of made their mark in the city and have taken up space through either parades or beauty pageants, sort of positive representations of the Dominican community in New York City. And those are the stories that are often left out of sort of media narratives. And we try our best to encourage folks to see that aspect of the archives. And we are going to continue doing that work of preserving the contributions of Dominicans to the city of New York, but also to the United States.
What is some advice you can give to incoming library and information science students?
I would encourage library science students that are incoming to find a community early. You know, graduate school is hard enough, and I think if you can find people who you can discuss your ideas and collaborate with, that would make the whole experience that much better. I joined the Society of American Archivists student group while I was in graduate school, and that really helped me have conversations with some of my classmates and really develop ideas about inclusion and diversity and just critical thoughts on the archival field and library field. So the other advice I would give is develop your online brand and manage it well. Advertising yourself and the skill set that you have on any given field, of this library or archives, I think will help you find a job. The other thing is internships is a great way to get your foot in the door and get some practice. Uh, and that's really one of the probably the best way for you to find employment, because now people can see what you could do instead of read it in on a resume. Um, the other thing is learn things outside of the curriculum. I think for me, doing an internship at Ponce Community College really helped me see other areas that I could work on, whether it was grant writing, being a better researcher, public speaking. These are all skills that I think you learn outside of the curriculum, even though you implement them in certain points of your career early on. I think it's important for you to get those skills outside while you're attending grad school. And then lastly, I would say have a sort of a timeline of what you want to accomplish, in the field. If there's something you want to do, whether it's submit a publication, an exhibition, apply for a grant, or get another skill certificate in something that you want to get better at, write it down and have it outlined.
Last question. What are some of the challenges in documenting and preserving marginalized communities? And what do you think are some of the solutions to this?
I think one of the main challenges right now for continuing the work of documenting, preserving marginalized communities is sustainability. I know there's issues with funding. There's been many budget cuts during the pandemic. I think some of the creative solutions to that is by increasing the visibility of the community archive, really showcasing to people the amazing work that you're doing and preserving, their historical experiences and record, and having interactive events where they feel that they're participating in that process of archiving and preserving their histories, because we need to be more inclusive and see the diversity of the community in ways that they can contribute and be collaborative partners in the archival process. And some of the work that community archives has done has been very insular, which is great because you want to have people who have the skill set to preserve those documents, right? But I think if you want to have folks support the work that you're doing, I think if people are interested and want to be part of the process, you should be more flexible in allowing them to contribute their own stories and make suggestions in terms of who gets represented in the archive and who's not, because it would only benefit in the long run to have so many voices represented in the community archive. And ultimately, I think that's the goal, for us to have so many different perspectives on a given person, place, or event that marked, an important turning point in the community's history. And I think another issue is many of these collections are not accessible online. You need funding as well for that, to digitize those collections. And if people see what's available through some of the visibility work that's being done, disseminating what the archives has already done, you'll have more support to get those collections up online, and now people have access to them. And I think this is something that's gonna continue to affect community archives. I think funding and finding ways to be sustainable are issues that have been sort of heightened during the pandemic, but they could often have creative solutions if you're willing to put together a proposal or an event and different activities where the public is participating and being more of a collaborative partner to what the community archive is all about and their mission and the ways they want the public to engage with their collections.
I hope you have enjoyed the video recordings today. And I also hope that you reach out and follow Jensen on his social media channels. Reach out to him via his institution. This young man has a wealth of information and knowledge that can benefit us all. Thank you.